speak slowly and also listen to my questions carefully. And just to avoid overlap in our speeches, allow me to say my questions first, or allow me to ask my questions first before you respond, and I will do the same.
Thank you.
At any point as well, if you would like me to repeat my question or you would like me to clarify any points, please do so. We've already gone through some of the topics that you were supposed to testify on the last date. You are testifying as an expert on sexual gender-based violence, otherwise known as SGBV, and for the purposes of your testimony, I will refer to sexual gender-based violence as SGBV. We've gone through your educational and professional background and training. You have given us the definition of SGBV and the different types, as well as some of the more severe types of SGBV, such as gang rape and FGM, and some of the complications arising from them, such as fistula. You were just explaining how the one-stop center works, which you do in collaboration with the network against gender-based violence, when you were interrupted by our technical difficulties. Just so that we can understand more clearly, I will just ask you perhaps just to give us what the definition of fistula is before we move on, please.
Fistula, for a layman to understand, is an opening between the bladder and the vagina, and also between the vagina and the rectum. It may occur as a result of difficult labor or obstructed labor. It may also occur as a result of long-term complication of FGM, which may lead to obstructed labor, or gang rape, as I mentioned last time, that raped a victim. At the same time, you introduce an object into the vagina, causing injury to the bladder, whereby a woman will be leaking urine continuously without control.
You've said that it's an opening between the rectum and the vagina, and you've already said also that some of the causes or symptoms would be leakage of urine through the vagina. Apart from leakage of urine, would there be any other excreta that is excreted from the vagina?
Yes, feces, of course. If there is a hole between the vagina and the rectum, there will be feces leaking through the vagina.
Thank you very much. We will then proceed to your to the point at which your testimony was interrupted. You were explaining about the one-stop center, and you had explained about all the different steps and the different procedure. You talked about the legal perspective as well as the psychosocial aspect of the one-stop center, and you were explaining about the medical aspect when your testimony basically was disrupted. Can you just continue from there and tell us what the medical aspect of the one-stop center is, please?
Yes, one-stop center is about 3 services under one unit. That is the service of the medical personnel, there are the nurses and the doctors, and also the services of the social worker, and then the service of the legal experts, that is the lawyers or the counsel, I will call it. For medical doctors and the nurses is to give medical services, in the sense you take the history when you receive these GBV cases at your facility, take history, examine the victim, send for any investigations, like if they are more than 12 years, you send them for pregnancy test. If there is, your history is pointing towards rape or defilement or whatever form of GBV, then you send them for pregnancy tests, scanning sometimes if necessary, and then also certain tests like HIV, and then also hepatitis tests. The reason for doing these tests is we want to confirm first, prior to this incident, whether the victim is pregnant or had an infection, or yes, and that will tell us so that we separate the two. So, because at the end of the day, you have to write a medical report after giving the medication, after examining the patient. You have to give medication to these victims. And then also the report has to be written, and this report has to go to the police station. they sometimes have to file it to the court so that you separate the two, the prior incident and the incident of the rape itself. What come after that? Usually we give them 3 months interval. If everything is negative, is normal, we call, because if you look at a window period for HIV and maybe 3 months. So we allow them to come 3 months after to check them again. If they happen to get positive, whether it's pregnancy or whether it's hepatitis or whether it is HIV, then we will relate to the rape or the domestic violence or the sexual violence that occur.
Dr. Daffeh, just please draw the microphone closer to you and just pull it down a little bit.
Thank you.
So that we can hear you properly. Thank you. I think you've just given us the steps that you would normally follow as a medical profession in the case of rape. Is that correct?
Yes, Council.
Yes. Do you receive any other kinds of sexual violence cases at the hospital apart from rape?
Yes, apart from rape, defilement, domestic violence like wife battering, especially pregnant women, we have seen a lot. FGM is another form of violence that we have seen, which in my experience led to the death of a child that I experienced, unfortunately. Kidnapping, and then
Let's just go back to FGM. You were explaining about the example of the death of a child. Just tell us more about that before you move on.
Yes, I think it's 2015. This a child that was less than 1 year was reported with the family members. Apparently, they said the child underwent circumcision. I was on duty on that day. And when I saw the child, I examined, but that time the child was motionless, and then all the vitals were annealed, the peripheries were cold, so, and it was paper white. Paper white, what I mean is you look at the conjunctiva of the child, means he has lost blood significantly.
Dr. Daffeh, one of the warnings I actually forgot to remind you about was the fact that some of the medical terms that you're using are not very familiar to us. So please, when you use such terms, can you just explain them in layman's words? You just explained one, which I cannot even repeat right now, in the eye. So just explain that to us.
Conjunctiva, that is, you
That's
open
right.
the eyes and see, and then if the patient or the victim is pale, then it will tell you. That's a clinical findings. But notwithstanding, you can also go to the lab and check the hemoglobin. It's the hemoglobin per se level to see.
And what is hemoglobin?
Well, that is the blood level, not the pressure. Is that a component?
And how old was this child?
It's less than 1 year.
And can you tell us whether there are different types of FGM and what those different types are?
Yes, there are different types. They are up to type 4. The first type is the cutting of the prepuce with or without the cutting clitoris. That's type 1. The type 2 is the cutting of the clitoris with or without, and then the labia minor. That is the tissues in the vagina. Those with medical will understand. And also the third type is the infibulation. Infibulation in the sense the cutting of the clitoris together with the labia majora, and then the remnants are stitched together, leaving the hole up and down. Up means you leave an opening for the urine to pass, and then down for the menstrual blood to pass. So in between them there will be a membrane. And then the fourth type is unclassified type. That is any procedure on the female genitalia that does not have any medical significance or purpose, then will be considered generally as the type 4 FGM.
And what was the type that this little girl was subjected to?
Well, this girl clitoris was cut completely. You can even see it. So she must have bled from the artery, from that region, and they could not control the bleeding because it took long time. And then by the time they arrived at the hospital, the child died.
Do you know what is the most common form of FGM that is normally performed on women or girls in the Gambia?
Gambia, it's a general notion that we don't have mutilation, it's cutting. But my clinical practice will has told me that, my clinical experience, I've seen women who are completely sealed. You can even see the labia minor together with the clitoris is cut, creating a scar, and sometimes there is only little hole. I've did so many procedures for women during Ramadan. Your Ramadan is the month that women normally get married. You have the highest percentage of marriage usually in the month of Ramadan or prior to Ramadan. Your people wanted to, especially those who are not married to. But you can realize that women will get, the girls will get married, go to their husband, they cannot penetrate them. So they have to come back to the hospital. Some will eventually go back to the traditional way of removal, but that's very dangerous. So they will usually come to the hospital, and then we will take to the theater. You have to put them on the general anesthesia again, because it's painful. And then you have to either use forceful dilatation, or you have to use an instrument to open to make sure that the woman continue with this sexual relations with the husband.
So basically, the woman would have to go through a procedure where the vagina would then have to be cut. Basically, it would be like going through the process of circumcision again.
Yes, I did that on many occasions because the circumcision was so bad that the man can never penetrate. In certain scenarios, I've seen also, the woman got pregnant because the hole was small. There is a sexual contact. A mere contamination of the hand can make a woman pregnant. I always tell people this. So on 2-3 occasions I've seen they got pregnant, and what we did was during labor. You are in labor, but the baby cannot come out. If you are lucky to find yourself in a setting where there are doctors who can operate, can do the procedure and open. Either you opened when the woman is fully dilated, that is during the labor, or you can take to the theater, operate, remove the baby and open the woman again. So it will be double procedure. You do the cesarean section at the same time also you open the vagina, so that afterwards can continue with her sexual life.
And would you say that this infibulation procedure would be one of the most severe forms of female circumcision or FGM?
Certainly.
And what are some of the complications that arise as a result of FGM? You have already explained that death can occur. I mean, this little girl came to you and she was pronounced dead. Can you tell us what other complications that can occur? You also mentioned fistula. Perhaps you can explain more in detail or give us other forms of complications.
The complication of FGM and then the rape in general will have immediate and the long-term complications. The immediate complication will be, first, as I mentioned, there will be physical injury, there will be pain, there will be bleeding, and that bleeding, if not controlled, you go into hypovolemic shock, and sometimes can lead to death if you don't arrive at the hospital on time. However, we can have other complications like urinary retention when it comes to FGM, that the female genital mutilation or cutting. Urinary retention can be one of the complications immediate. We can also have infection, can be also one of the, because most of the time these are not done under sterile procedures. They can use any material, and then through that you can catch infections. For FGM, those could be the short immediate complication, but the long term are many. The keloid, the scar, the cyst on the vulva can be a complication. Keloid, that means scar. It's a medical term we use. Cyst means is the swelling in the vulva containing a pus. Pus is data in local field in Mandinka. And then also they can have what we call sexual dysfunctions. This is one of they can have what we call pelvic pain and then all sort of things.
Thank you very much, Doctor. From what you have said, FGM or female genital mutilation, otherwise known as female genital mutilation or human circumcision is a very serious form of sexual violence, and it can cause some serious health complications, including death.
Yes, Council.
Okay, can we just move on to perhaps other forms of sexual violence that you have experienced working on such cases?
Yes. Apart from rape by FGM, we have defilement and also wife battery or assault or physical violence against women, especially pregnant women, is so common. I've received few cases, and sometimes also during my antenatal service, that is clinic for the pregnant woman, which I run every Thursday. Sometimes with the conversation with women, you can detect the violence happening in the house. And on many occasions, there about 3-4 times, we called some of the victims who were involved and called their partners to come to the hospital, and we advised to help women carry the pregnancy, because the pregnancy belongs to all of them.
And can you give us, you've mentioned rape cases, and in your view, how prevalent is rape in the Gambia?
I may not be able to give the statistics of the whole country, but my hospital, which I'm in charge of the one-stop center, from 2014 to present, I have received 46 cases in 2014. That include both domestics and sexual violence. But if you look at the rape form, the majority. Rape is always more than the 50% of what you registered yearly. Or rape will comprise also the attempted rape. Sometimes it's not only but attempted one, so we book them under the same category.
My apologies, please continue.
Yes. In 2014, 46 cases. In 2015, we registered 70 cases, comprising all the forms of violence, but rape again forms the majority. And then in 2016, it went up to 94. That's my hospital. And the same rape formed the majority, and the people affected, or the girls affected, or female affected, are mostly between the age of 5 or sometimes even less to 12 years, and also between 13 to 30 years usually. That's where you have a bulk of the people who are victims affected.
So not only is rape the most prevalent form of sexual violence, but it's actually on the increase according to your statistics.
Yes.
Do you have these statistics with you that you mentioned?
Yes, I have the statistics with me.
Do you have a copy of it?
Yes.
Can we take a look at it?
Can I proceed?
Just a minute. I just need to refer to the statistics. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ture. Okay. This is the statistics, NGBV data, Kanifing General Hospital. These are the statistics that you were referring to just now in your testimony.
Yes.
And you already mentioned the fact that it has been disaggregated according to age of victims, the gender, as well as the different types of sexual violence. Is that correct?
Yes, Council.
Mr. Chairman, we would like to put these statistics of the Kanifing General Hospital from 2015 to 2019 into evidence. I will give you the exhibit number later on. Thank you. We may proceed, Dr. Daffeh. Can you give us an example of cases of rape that you have actually experienced? Perhaps the more serious ones, like rape of children, for example. Have you encountered any in your professional experience?
Yes, there are a lot, but the most recent, and that case already ended up The perpetrator was imprisoned for 15 years, and that came in 2019. It's a case that happened in 2014. Unfortunately, the case was finally decided in 2019. You can see the gap, and that is shows some defect in our judicial system as far as I'm concerned. I stand to be corrected. This is a child of 11-year-old in Brusubi. According to the family and from my report, has a mental issue, but this mental issue usually is periodic, not always. And then when it comes as a flare-up, usually will disappear from home. And then she happens to disappear from home and then met this man who invited her to the house. And then stay with her there for about 2-3 days, according to her and the family. And then according to her narration, that the man forcefully slept with her. I mean, it was raped her in the house. So you can see the kidnapping and then also at the same time sexual violence, rape. So the case was reported in 2014. I was new in Carnifing at that time. And we filed it. And then the medical report was subsequently given. We did all our treatment. And then the case was called. I went to High Court to testify. I think that was 2017. And the case was decided in 2019. And the guy was convicted for 15 years. It was a very bad case. This is a girl who already had a mental problem. We know this, the effect of the sexual and domestic violence, they can also go into psychological trauma. So insult upon injury. You rape this girl again, already has another medical condition. You're going to make the condition of this woman worse, or this girl worse rather. That was my experience. The other experience, shortly, I came here last time. This is a girl of about 6-year-old around Yuna. The village is there, but I forgot the name. This girl is a Dara student. In the morning, according to the mom, she usually take them to Dara. But that very day, I don't know, the little baby was sick. So she decided not to go with her, and I told the girl, now you have been going with me. You know the way, so you can go on your own. Unfortunately, this man met up with this girl, physically assaulted her, broke the 2 teeth, and then they slept with her, and they penetrated her. When we saw, that was shortly before I came here last time, examined the case, it was injury. The hymen was broken completely. You can even see the bleeding coming. And also in the posterior vagina, it was also lacerated. So it was so bad. The police officer who in fact escorted this was crying bitterly because he could not stand it. So you can see how not only the victims can have effect of the sexual violence, but even we as medical doctors and nurses and the police officers, we call it the vicarious trauma or the counter-transference. The effect can transfer to us, because anytime you think about them, it seems sometimes you want to put yourself in their position. Those are the effects that we can also, and I've seen that in that police officer. Probably what she's thinking, this could be her own child or somebody, if this happened to her child. So it was bad.
So not only have we seen the physical violence of rape, but also psychological trauma and the psychological effects of rape as well. Do you have any more examples of other forms of cases that you have experienced at Carnifing General Hospital?
Yes, high-profile case that I experienced is still ongoing at the court. The case is not decided, but this happened also in 2014. It's 14 girls. They live around Keseri and Kololi. I was running a clinic. That was in March, sorry. And then they were escorted by the Operation Bulldozer, that these girls were usually sexually violated by one man at around Senegambia. And these kids are girls who usually sell around the beach area, the hotel areas. And then this man will eventually invite them, cook for them, but with another intention, do pornography according to their story, also play with their genitalia, with their breast, and sleep with some of them. And then our findings revealed some of them were sexually active because it was long. They have been going there for a long time. So it could be probably as a result of that, or it could be they were between the age of 12 and then 17, 16, 14 of them. The case is still ongoing, I think, at High Court because I went there to testify on 2 occasions, but the matter is still not decided.
Thank you very much for providing those examples of rape cases that you have experienced. But just in terms of the medical tests that you were explaining previously, you explained different types of tests, hepatitis test, AIDS test, as well as checking on the physical injury or not of the victim. Are there any DNA tests that are conducted here in the Gambia to determine perhaps who the perpetrator of a rape is?
Unfortunately, no. In fact, that affects our service. DNA is services in the Gambia, unfortunately not available. And I always emphasize any gathering of GBV or any workshop or any times I meet with lawmakers or the people in the authority, it's a concern. Because the essence is not only to help establish rape, to connect the perpetrator to the crime or the crime scene, but it also helps to vindicate the perpetrator. So it's good for both. So, and I think most of our cases, when they report, you don't find evidence because there is late reporting. They report late, like more than 72 hours. You may not see the sperm's presence in the vagina sometimes, or you may not even see the injury because already 72 hours has elapsed. And then it's difficult to establish anything that will help the court to establish whether the rape has occurred or not. So DNA will help us a lot. And I think it's high time this country also have it if we want to fight for sexual and domestic violence in this country and the rape.
So how does the lack of DNA facilities in the Gambia, how does it affect the prosecution of criminal cases in court for rape?
As counsel, I think you may understand that rape, you have to corroborate it. It's not only a victim's narration of what happened, because usually it happened in a situation where nobody is present, usually. So it's the perpetrator and the victim. They all narrate their story differently. So to connect them, you need something. And what is that thing is the DNA, to look for the evidence that is left by the perpetrator at the scene or that the perpetrator left on the victim. And that will connect them. And that will help. It's not only here, but outside world, in America, in those days it do happen. People are sent to jail because of rape and they did not commit any crime. And about when the DNA was introduced, it exonerated so many people. So I think here also it will help us to do our job better and also help both the victim and the perpetrator. Because if we are dealing with these people, you have to be neutral and not to be biased. You make sure that the justice is served. You exactly report what you saw, so that at the end of the day, the justice is served and the justice is done on behalf of both.
I know this is not your area, but do you know what the conviction rate is for rape in the Gambia? Do you know whether it's low or is it high?
Well, the convictions, you mean the number of people who are convicted, I'm not sure. But I know that penalties are attached, ranging from the 10 to 25 years and even life imprisonment for those that violated people sexually who are under their care, like the parents or the guardians or even the teachers. It's for life imprisonment, according to Sexual Offense Act 2013.
Thank you very much. You've already mentioned the lack of DNA evidence in the Gambia or facilities to test DNA evidence. Do you face any other challenges at the one-stop shop, or as or in your role as focal person at Kanifing General Hospital? Um, just general medical problems that you may have.
Yes, we used to face problems like logistics and supplies, but recently we have some supply, but that is whether it's sustainable is a question. Reporting early to the hospital is a challenge for us. We know the culture of our society. People tend to settle issues at the family level or the community level before they report. Sometimes it is only when the things go out of the hand, then they will proceed to the police, and from the police they will come here. But those are challenges. Those are the supplies, and then also the reporting to our facility. Before we have office of the center, because it exists as one stop, but there was no office identified. It was a challenge because our labor ward, which was not very ideal, women are in labor, and at the same time you want to examine the victims of the sexual and domestic, so it was not conducive at all. Sometimes you have to allow them to wait till you have a space to examine them. But now we have identified a space, even though still that place also we need to improve on the facilities there, but at least we have a facility now. But basically, the supplies and also the late reporting of the victims was our challenge. Is our challenge. Sorry.
Okay, in terms of focusing on the one-stop centers, you've already explained the constraints that you face in terms of the medical aspect as well as the legal aspect. What about the psychosocial aspect of the one-stop center? Are there any challenges that you face there?
Yes, there are challenges because the whole idea about the one-stop center is to have 3 services under one unit. The ideal way would be to have them present or to have access to them whenever we need them. But that is not the case. Notwithstanding, on our part as the medical practitioners, nurses, and we do our part. If there is a need to call them for any counseling, we will do. And if there is need for any lawyers to intervene, also we will call. As of now, that's how it is. But they should all be on that. They should have their offices there, separate from, and then the social workers should have his offices there, and the medical team also have their offices there, where you have also the examination room. But unfortunately, we don't have that one all complete. But the idea of the one-stop center is in existence.
And how are these sexual cases, sexual violence cases, normally referred to the hospital? How do they get there?
They usually come with police officers, which I always complained the way they suffer than the way how they reach at the hospital. I've interviewed so many police officers. They will say, well, we don't have transport. I have to stand on the way waiting for lift to come to the hospital. Sometimes they will tell me my fare that the victims and the parents of the victims don't have money. So I'm using could you imagine the little salary that you get for your family, you're using also on the victim. The police station cannot have any logistics to carry this victim to the hospital. It's a real challenge. And then sometimes you see the back and forth, and it also delays the process. Because if there is no vehicle and you, the police officer, don't have money, so what do? It means you cannot go that very day. You have to come there. And the more time you delay, the evidence are lost. The more we lose our evidence as medical team.
So the policy in place basically for referral of criminal cases to the hospital is not effective, and it can cause loss in evidence.
It's not effective at all.
Okay. Do you have any other constraints that you know of that police officers face?
Well, the other challenge would be the pressure on us. It's not only the GBV case that you deal with, you also deal with other cases like women, pregnant women in labor. You have to go to the theater, you'll be operating the victim will be waiting. Sometimes some will wait for 6 hours. It depends. Because, yes, all cases are equal before us, but we give priority to cases. A woman in labor cannot wait. If a sexual violence comes and there is no life threatening, she is not bleeding, obviously you will ask them to wait, then you take care of that pregnant woman. So that is the situation we are faced with. So that will boil down to increasing the capacity, both the nurses and the doctors to be trained on the GBV, so that the waiting time for the victims or the survivors can be minimized.
What happens in instances where the victim reports first to the hospital? Would they normally be sent back to the police station, or would you treat them?
If we are done with our investigation, treatment, we normally send them back to the police station. And if they need a medical remark, then they will come with the police officer, or the police officer will come alone, and we will write that medical remark and give it to the police officer.
And in your experience, what gender is mostly affected by sexual-based violence?
Certainly women and the children, the girls.
Have you had any cases of male violence, sexual violence reported to you?
If my memory serves me, I think it's only 4 from 2014. One was a boy that was sexually penetrated by a man. That's one. The other one was a white man, was have a Gambian wife, was violated also at home, was physically. The other one was a man who married a second wife, and then I don't think the first wife was not pleased with that. And while having a shower, he just threw a chemical on the private part, was admitted also in our hospital. The fourth one I will not remember, but these are the cases that I remembered against men. But basically, the women and the girls are the most vulnerable.
You mentioned the first case where a man penetrated a boy. Was it a case of sodomy? And was it rape?
Well, it was not out of consent. And if it is not out of consent, even though it's the same sex, well, it's a forceful penetration, and is to me, I will call it as a sexual violence.
And in your opinion, I mean, do you have a particular kind of woman that would come more to you on issues of sexual violence? Are there particular types of women, for example, that are more prone to sexual violence than others?
The people who are younger age, like from 5 to 12 years, are the most common, even though we have people from within 13 to 25 years. But the children between the age of 5 and 12 are the most vulnerable from the statistics all over, or generally. Because the reason being, they are weak and they are easily threatened, and you can easily make them silent than a grown-up one. So that may be the reasons.
So that would be the age range that you would normally receive more frequently at your hospital?
Certainly.
What about in terms of social class or religion, race? I mean, do you think that there's any particular woman that is more prone to sexual violence than any other one?
The sexual and domestic violence, as far as Gambia is concerned, well, is not only directed to one specific ethnic groups. It's across all aspects of our society. Even though there may not be equal percentage between the tribes, but it happens in all the sectors of the society, regardless of the race or the cultural background or the educational background or their position in the community. It can happen. I've seen security people being involved in the rape, both the police, the military, paramilitary. I've seen also the imams involved in the rape. I've seen ustaz involved in the rape, teachers involved. I've seen medical personnel involved in the rape. So it crosses all sectors of the society.
I'll just take the opportunity to ask you a particular question here. When you've mentioned that you've seen perpetrators of rape being from the security forces, for example. We've had some testimony here at the TRRC from victims that may benefit from your medical expertise. So we'll just ask you some questions and see whether or not you're able to assist us with some scenarios. For example, when one loses consciousness whilst in detention and then later finds themselves in hospital, having woken up and bleeding from their private parts, what would you say, in your medical opinion, would be the possible causes of such an incident?
Well, that will depend on circumstances, whether you are on confinement or whether you are in prison or you are restrained. Unconscious patient bleeding from the vagina can be caused by many. It could be a normal menses. It could be as a result of trauma. It could be because the woman is pregnant and is by being violated, or maybe out of stress or torture that become miscarriage. Or it could be a medical condition, as I said, a fibroid. Women can have this occasional bleeding. So it depends on the circumstances. But again, the history before that woman or that person is confined will lead you to whether this was as a result of the confinement, or it was after the confinement, or before the confinement. In fact, these conditions were there. So the history before that is very vital if you want to establish whether that was as a result of the torture during confinement or during detention.
And we are talking specifically about, bleeding from the private part. And you mentioned, it can be caused by torture. What kind of torture are you referring to?
It can be physical torture. It can also be a sexual penetration, because for any sexual relation or intercourse to occur, psychologically, women, they must be prepared. You must be in the mood. And also, that makes them lubricate. That's why it's never painful. But instead, and then if that is done on a coercive situation, usually you can cause injury, because at that time they will be very dry. Psychological that can also condition before.
And the situation of sexual torture, which you describe, would be a situation of rape. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what other symptoms would you be looking for, perhaps on the physical, external features of the body to corroborate a finding of rape in that instance?
Rape, usually it occurs under coercive circumstance. Coercive circumstance, you have to rule for external injury on the body, either a cut by a knife, or sometimes even strangulation, scratches, bruises all over the body, or the clothes that the person is wearing, whether they are torn, whether they are in order. So you do that head-to-toe examination physically, and also the clothes that the woman is wearing, to see any injury. So the injury also has their descriptions. Sometimes the way they defend themselves will tell you, the knife, that this was a point of defending, maybe so the history will tell you, physical examinations from head to toe, and also, of course, your vaginal examination will tell you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. That was very helpful. You've already explained the fact that even though sexual violence is more prevalent amongst women, but you have seen some rare cases of male violence. Have you received perhaps victims who are, let's say, HIV positive, AIDS patients who have also suffered forms of sexual violence before?
I have never registered any. It's only one. But that one, the 14 girls I told in 2014, among them one was positive. But when we traced, because the family also, when she was positive, we have to cancel the mother also to test. and we realized that the mother was positive. So probably that could be we can trace where the infection come from the mom, because the rest of the other girls, 13, were negative. Yes.
But she was a victim of sexual violence, and she was an AIDS patient.
Well, that was our finding, incidental finding. It could be.
Okay, very well. What about victims from the lesbian, gay, or bisexual, transgender, and intersex community, the LGBTIs as they are commonly known as? I mean, have you had any experience in the Gambia dealing with such victims?
We had a training on that, doctors, but it's difficult to trace them because they fear, and usually they don't present themselves. It's the clinical experience. Sometimes you go deep to find out, because we all know the stigma around people of lesbian and the gays in our society. Virtually there is no room for them. So to come out and then openly and tell you as a health personnel is, unless you use your clinical experience to ask them, present yourself as you are the one who want to help them, their sexual life, and then you will be able to know. But it's happening in this country, because the studies, when we did the training, that's the time I myself realized that, oh, I never knew that this is happening in this country.
So such victims would be underreported because of the stigma attached to their status?
Yeah, obviously that will be underreported.
You have explained some of the health complications arising from sexual violence cases. Can you give us any more?
I've made mention of the unwanted pregnancy when rape occurs. I've also given an example of unsafe abortion. I've also given an example of risky sexual behavior that a rape victim or a victim of sexual violence can adopt. Because I think I have a victim who told me, well, I've tried to maintain my virginity, but for the fact that I lost as a result of this, I could not longer hold it again. And I advised, still there is something that we can do. And I offered hymen or if provided you want to hold yourself again. Well,
can you tell us what that means again?
Well, it's to try, and it's a procedure you do to put the hymen back to it. But it can never be original, but at least it will help the woman.
What is the word? Can you please repeat
hymen
it?
or It's from the word hymen.
All right, thank you. Please proceed.
Yes, those are the immediate, as I said, physical injuries and then also pain. The long-term complication will be pelvic pain. There can be also mental debility, psychological trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. You can have also what we call phobias, and then also stress. You can also have generally, psychologically and medically, these are some of the things that can affect the perpetrator in the long term. And the most important for female also, obviously they will get old and then they will get married, and the infertility, because we all know the sexual violence, for example rape, is never, the perpetrators never protect themselves, like use of condoms, so it will be forceful penetration without protection. And usually you can catch any kind of infection. And that infections, when they are chronic, they are not treated. Usually they can lead to what we call PID, pelvic inflammatory disease. And this can later cause infertility in the sense that the tubes of the uterus, that is the womb, can get blocked because of the fibrosis. And then that can affect the woman's life again, different from the rape and the psychological trauma that she underwent. Yes.
And of course, you've already explained, some of the other complications from sexual violence, such as fistula and, some of the physical injuries, and you just mentioned some of the psychological aspects or effects of that as well. You've also mentioned some of the local challenges dealing with cases of SGBV. From a medical perspective, can you give us some more of the challenges that you face at the Kanifing General Hospital?
The challenges maybe that is more from the community level. The culture of silence, that people decided to bury the hatchet or put everything under the carpet, not to report, because there you give the room for perpetrators to continue doing, like the case I reported around Yuna, that the information I gathered was the man was fond of doing that, and I asked, since when? They could not tell me, which means the society is aware, but nobody wants to report the case, and now the effect is continuing. So those kind of culture of silence and the naive attitude generally also is contributing toward promoting SGBV in this country.
What do you mean by the naive attitude?
Well, generally, if I speak to women about this sexual domestic violence, some say it is not happening. If you see a woman being raped because the woman wants it, surprisingly. And then there was a survey that was conducted here in 2010 and 2018. That was by GIBOS, Gambia Bureau of Statistics, supported by UNICEF. 2010, the 75% of women supported wife battery in this country. It was a survey all over there. And then 75% support FGM. 2018, the same thing was also conducted. It's only half, 49.9% supported wife battery. But you still see that the FGM is still about 75%, which is still the women folk also, we need to create more awareness, because for us to fight SGBV in this country. As I said, people may believe the GBV is a product of genetics, or maybe psychotic or crazy, because and the norms and the inequalities within our societies. And those attitudes, I think they can be learned. They can be unlearned.
Thank you, Doctor. You also mentioned some of the constraints you faced, in cases in court, for example, prosecution of rape cases. You've already mentioned some of the social aspects or social constraints as well, and cultural and traditional. But from the medical perspective, what are some of the challenges in terms of just the medical side? What are some of the challenges that you face mainly in dealing with these cases?
Medical challenges, as I said, will be from the investigation. Investigations, the perpetrator in our, the victims in our hospital usually is service free, if it is available. But sometimes it's not available. If it's not available, then it means it cannot be done. So that's a challenge. Why is a challenge? Because when you are dealing with the victim of sexual violence, you want to protect that lady from future complications. And doing those examinations and tests will allow you to treat that person. Like we give PEP at the hospital. PEP, you have to know the status before you give. Usually, we give sometimes if at all it's not available, like the PEP for the HIV and for pregnancy. But it would be wise to have those investigations readily available at the hospital. And also DNA, as I mentioned, is one of the biggest challenges as far as our medical side is concerned with regards to this GBV.
You've already provided some medical statistics also on sexual violence cases from Kanifing General Hospital. and you've given us the kind of violations. You've also talked about the different age groups in which sexual violence is more prevalent. Do you have any means of identifying, for example, who the perpetrator of sexual violence is in any particular case?
That's a challenge. Usually in our history, we will ask, who is the perpetrator? Is it a family member? Is it closer to you? Is it within the same community? But when the victim comes to the hospital, already the perpetrator is at large or is with the police. In fact, in our register, we have a column where the perpetrator's details should be taken, so that we also examine them too and then find out what kind of infection they have. But again, if you want to test somebody's status, you have to ask the consent. So you see, our hands are tied sometimes. So I don't know what will happen. I think we need to look into our laws and see. With regards to the sexual violence, especially rape, I think the medical staff should be empowered in our laws to make sure that the perpetrators are tested, because those sexual activity is never protected. No condom was used, and then the woman can get infection through that, different from the trauma and the pain she went through.
And from the information that you would normally get about the likely perpetrators, would you be able to identify whether they're state agents or whether they're civilians, for example? Is that information you would normally get?
Yes, normally they will tell us, yes, it's a police officer, yes, it's an ustaz, or sometimes it's an imam. Of course, we will do acts and they will tell us, but we will never set an eye on the perpetrator. Usually they are at the police station.
So, for example, what would be the proportion of state agents who have committed rape vis-a-vis civilians, and perhaps also just, looking at maybe particular people in society, like you just mentioned, imams, like nobody would think that an imam would commit rape, for example. So what would be the proportions of these kind of people committing sexual offenses?
The cases we receive are few, but as I told you, there are underreporting in this country, and this culture of silence may also be a contributing factor for this underreporting. If there is more sensitization and then awareness, women empowerment, and I think we can register more cases from the respectful people in the society. But that's a challenge. The culture of silence and underreporting is.
And you've given us a lot of challenges, a lot of constraints, a lot of problems in the system dealing with sexual violence cases. Do you have any recommendations on how to handle such cases in the future from your medical perspective?
Yeah, the recommendation I want to give, first of all, to run an office that will be responsible for sexual and domestic violence in any country, funding is fundamental. If you look at Network Against Gender-Based Violence, it's private government thing, and then they supported by, then it was a Finnish foreign ministry, and now it's Action Aid the Gambia. I think the government need to take the ownership of this program, and then fund it well, train people well, sensitize the population to make sure we reduce or even, if possible, eradicate sexual and domestic violence in this country. But without their commitment, the political will and commitment and support, then it will be very difficult. My experience is telling me that it's more of lip service than people. I think our actions should be more than our talking.
And what is the level of the training of medical personnel on sexual violence matters?
Well, not every medical doctor or nurse is opportune to benefit from the training. Of course, a network is doing training every year in Combo and in provinces, which I was a trainer. but still it's not enough, because if you look at the health facilities in this country, every major health center and then the district hospital should have a one-stop center. And for you to operate one-stop center in those facilities, you must train people, because dealing with GBV cases is different from dealing with other ordinary patients. Their issues are many. Their right has been violated. They were physically violated. They are also in pain, and they are thinking about the long-term complications, and they are thinking about the future of their life, because what next will happen. So dealing with them, you need to undergo training.
And apart from the activities of the network, especially on the one-stop centers, does government provide any kind of facility for victims of sexual violence in the Gambia?
Well, usually we use SOS, but I don't think that is government-owned. But governments would have a center for the victims, fully funded. They should have.
And you're saying that they don't have?
Well, no.
So that responsibility has been shifted to the network against gender-based violence?
Yeah, network work with SOS, yes. Any victim that need a psychosocial counseling and need to be separated, sometimes they will send them there.
And who do you think is responsible for victims of sexual violence in the Gambia? Is it a civil society organization, or is it government?
The network partner with a civil society group, Action Aid the Gambia, to fight against sexual and domestic violence. So we have stakeholders who are also part and parcel of this fight against sexual and domestic violence in the Gambia. Of course, the civil society were also at forefront.
I think we're coming almost to the end of your testimony. I don't know if you have any more recommendations before we conclude.
Yes, the recommendation I made mention of a few. DNA I have mentioned here. I have mentioned the Center for the Victim that will be government owned. I have also mentioned about the funding generally of these networks program, and also the centers in all the health facilities. We also have to look into our legal side. I think you have already made mention of the cases that were seen in 2014 for the cases to be decided in 2019. Well, I don't know, there might be reason for the delay, but I think the justice delayed is justice denied. And some of these victims, you realize that by the time you call them to court, they are already married. And you want to bring them back to the courtroom with their families to testify again. What are you doing again? Are you not traumatizing them more again? So I think the issues of the GBV at court should be dealt with, and then they shouldn't allow it to drag on and then wait until even the people who took that history have forgotten about who is the perpetrator, who is the victim. So you have to go to the file and check, what do I wrote? When was it? Which date? So it's not helping at all. I think we need to look at our judicial system. The government, Ministry of Justice should look at it, work in partnership with network to see what they can do about it. I think they should be given priority when it comes to the court proceeding, and they make sure that their cases are handled as soon as possible so that the justice is served. The other recommendations that I want to make, I have also throw light on that. That is to train the people who are involved in the sexual and domestic. The health workers were trained, but what about the police and the lawyers? Although we have few lawyers who are involved in our, but this should be ongoing. It's not like it should happen once and all, because people will come and go. Today I'm there, tomorrow I may leave. Why I said this, in 2016 when I went to Tanzania for my program, virtually my center collapsed. Even though there are doctors in the hospital, there are nurses in the hospital, but people were not familiar with it. And for the fact that people don't like going to court to testify, because of the cross-examination, which is always difficult for people. So people don't tend to associate themselves with issues of sexual and domestic violence. But I think the training will help if they have the knowledge. I think that will empower them to deal with them and also to go to court and testify.
Thank you very much, Doctor. That is the end of your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I hand over the witness to you for any questions you may have, and back also to him for any final words. Just to let you know that the exhibit number is 91. Thank you.
Thank you, the council. The request for that number is granted. And thank you very much, Dr. Daffeh, for your testimony. Before I give the floor to commissioners who may have some questions to ask, I have a small confession to make. Sorry, I missed your testimony the other day. I wasn't here. And the first 10 minutes of your testimony this afternoon, I felt a bit uncomfortable and uneasy because coming from a 30-hour flight from Beijing, China to Banjul, it's as if the airplane landed here. I got out of the plane, came in here, and then started hearing about FGM in a very graphic way. It was that part that thinking that is a very conservative society and culture, to hear that graphic explanation, which I think is excellent in a society like this. I never thought I would hear it here, but that was what made me, having been born and raised here, a bit uncomfortable hearing about the different types of FGM. I felt uncomfortable. I was looking for space under the desk so I could just hide and see what is. But counsel came to my help when she contextualized it right away and said, FGM is a form of sexual violence. See, voila, that's it. I'm rescued now. This is all okay. I won't go under the desk, because I started looking at you and say, who is this doctor? Where is he coming from? He's talking about these things in a conservative society and culture. But anyway, I've been helped, and I think the contribution is tremendous. Thank you again very much indeed. Commissioners, if you have any questions to ask, please also indicate. Bishop, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Daffeh, I think you mentioned about a little girl of about 6. That was, this FGM thing was performed on her. And there was a complication. By the time they brought her to the hospital, she passed away. Was it the 6-year-old or?
It's less than 1 year. Less than 1 year.
Less than 1 year?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, my question is, what happened to the person or persons who performed the circumcision on them, on her?
Yes, unfortunately, as I told you earlier on, that we have a society, this culture of silence and also to negotiate things at the family level. Unfortunately, this girl was circumcised by the grandmother. The whole family came, and I insisted that the matter be reported to the police stations, and then we'll open a file, and then something should be done about it. People were on their knees, and then it happened to a point that the old woman is not even healthy from them. If we send to prison or you take that woman to police stations, you may cause another problem. And then it was a difficult situation. The family members who should even go forward with the case are telling you that, well, if you should if we proceed this case to the police stations, then it means the problem will come back to us. So you see the society. So at the end of the day, it's difficult, even for me. What I did was to file it as reference, and then And I told them the question that they should report the matter, and if the matter is reported, then I will write a report, or certainly. And I told them that the woman should desist from it, and then at their family level, and then they should not continue or allow her to be doing that kind of procedures that she could not take care of the complications. Because FGMs, yes, you do, but the complication, can you take care of it? The bleeding? No. Then why? If you can take care of the complication, that is only one side. You may, but even that one, it is not proper. It's violating the right of a woman or a girl. So that's how it is, but we file it. Commissioner. Yes.
Thank you. Deputy, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Doctor. You have helped us in making recommendations. This is what we are required to do. Recommendations that include initiatives on human rights and peace building for children. Your testimony has given us a picture of a country where children between the ages of 5 to 12 are at risk. Your colleague before you, from sexual gender-based violence. Your colleague before you, Hadi Boj Baro, also gave a very excellent testimony, just like yours, on the risks that children face in this country, and ended up by asking, are we living in a country of pedophiles? As a country, we are committed. We should be. What you have said shows that we are not committed to protecting children, to provide safety and security for them. So if children are not safe, they are not secure, they are not protected, will those children be at peace? This child that you have just described, the 6-year-old, who was violently violated, her sexual reproductive health rights were violated. Physically, she was violated to the extent she lost her teeth. I'm sure she's suffering psychologically. The family must be going through very difficult times. From your explanation, it seems like it was an outsider who did it, but the people within the community knew that it was an outsider who did it. But at the same time, the gatekeepers who are supposed to protect the children, the teachers, the religious leaders, parents in the homes, are all violating the rights of these children. I have taken note of your recommendations. I've added one, of course, which is the resources for the, for the security services to be able to take the victims to the hospital on time. But I think we really, as a society, should take this business of sexual gender-based violence very seriously, because every day you see young girls and boys going to and from school in the morning, in the evening, and all these children are at risk. I just wanted to make that comment, Doctor, and to thank you very much for this excellent afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my Deputy. If there are no further questions, Dr. Daffeh, do you have any concluding remarks to make? If you do, please proceed to make them now.
Yes, I want to thank the commissioners, the council, the team, for giving me this opportunity to be here today, to speak to the whole nation and the world at large. The magnitude of the sexual and domestic violence in this country is deeply honored. And I also want to seize this opportunity to thank my team, the network office, the police whom I work with, and then my nurses, the doctors who are involved in the sexual and domestic violence case in this country. I have few remarks to make in our society. I think we need to wake up, in the sense we need to know what we want as a society. I believe that women and children are the most vulnerable when it comes to SGBV in the Gambia and the whole world at large. we need to protect them. How do we protect them? If we protect these people, we protect the whole society. If they are not protected, then the society is not protected. I don't believe that any family head will sit at home when your family, your wives and your children are in danger. I don't think so. So we need to empower them and protect them. Again, we need to look at how to tackle this SGBV from the grassroots. For me, I believe we have a problems at our schools. In the sense, the curriculum. I used to remember that a curriculum that were taught in schools, family life educations, it educates the young girls how to take care of their virginity, how to be careful when it comes to sexual activity. It also gives them a picture of what and what to have in consequence if you do A, B, and C. So it's a curriculum that I think it should be reintroduced for the younger generation, especially girls in schools, to educate them, to make them aware, because they are the most vulnerable. Again, there is another curriculum that is absent again, civic. It makes people an upright members in the society, make them responsible. It's also absent. It imposes on you, or it gives you that sense of nationalism. If there is no sense of nationalism for any citizens, always there will be problem. And that's what Gambia we have gone through. The sense of nationalism, as far as this country is concerned, is zero. We only think about ourselves, and that's not helping. It's high time that we love this country. It's high time that we speak the truth, and it's high time that we work together to make sure that we eradicate the sexual and domestic violence in this country. It's doable. It's not only a lip service, but our actions, as I said, speaks louder than our voice. In that way, we will move forward. If not, then this issue of sexual and domestic violence will continue to perpetrate in our society. From the 2014 to 2019, if you look at my statistics, it's always on increase. It may be due to people are coming forward because we are now a democratic society. People are now not afraid to come forward to report the cases, but yet still, if the trend is going like that, I'm afraid it's not helping us and doesn't tell well for our society. So we should come together and then help women and children of this country. If they are healthy, I think the society will be healthy. If they are empowered, the whole society is empowered. So it's our responsibility. I made mention that GBV in this country affected all sectors of the society. I have seen lawyers, families were affected. Comes to one-stop center. They are legal practitioners because their family members are affected by this MSB. So it's not like when you are the minister, or you are the imam, or you are the lawyer, that you cannot be affected. By the way, all our kids go to school. And then when they are at school, or when they are coming out, sometimes we are not with them. We don't know what happened. They can be kidnapped on the way. Anything can happen to them. So I think we need to look into it. But these two curriculum, for me, I think it's good. If you look at this country, a small country, I think we should be more than where we are. The saddest thing is Gambians, unfortunately, we don't learn lesson. I'm sorry to go backward, but if you look at it, 1981, we never learned lessons. 94, we never learned lessons. And 2016, I thought we would learn lessons, but I don't think so. Because if you look at the attitude of the people generally, I don't see any sense of nationalism. And if that fails, then they will go into anarchy, go into chaos, which is not good for this country. This country got its independence together with Singapore, a landlocked country, if I'm right. Why Singapore is at top and where? We got independent. In fact, we got before them. We got in February. I think they got in May. If Singapore will be termed as one of the most industrialized nations, Why not Gambia? They are not intelligent than us. This country is blessed with a lot of resources. And I think we need to condone each other in the sense that to avoid violence, let's support each other. If I am content, I am well off, and I have everything in mind, but my neighbors are poor, they will steal from me, they will harass my kids, and they will spoil my kids. That's the danger. So that's why we should carry each other and then embrace each other so that we make a better society. That's what I have for this commission.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Daffeh, for those very, very wise words. The third triplet, Gambia, Singapore, was the Maldives. On the 21st of September, 1965, all three were admitted as members of the United Nations. The other two have left us behind. Singapore, as you said correctly, is something that perhaps we need to think very much about why we have been left behind. But anyway, thank you so much for those very wise words, and thank you also for coming to testify and enlightening us on the very important issue of sexual and gender-based violence. Thank you again very much for your testimony. Before we conclude, there is an issue that was brought to the attention of the Commission that is causing some concern on our part. And the Commission would want me to make a statement on its behalf to highlight this issue. I will read the statement out, and it speaks for itself, and it will be issued as a press release. The statement I will read. The Commission is deeply concerned about the harassment and intimidation of some victims of sexual violence who testified about the violations and abuses of their human rights at the TRRC. It is most unfortunate and unacceptable that some survivors of sexual violence who have endured such horrific experiences are being re-victimized by some members of the public as a result of their willingness to appear at the TRRC and give a public account of what happened to them. No one chooses someone to be a victim of sexual violence. The testimonies of such victims should not be seen as an opportunity to score political or any other points. Their stories should not be dismissed. When victims of sexual violence use the TRRC proceedings to narrate their ordeal, there should be a space to promote healing, accountability, and the non-recurrence of such heinous crimes. It should never be a space to blame, stigmatize, or harass victims. As Gambians, we have a collective responsibility to end sexual and gender-based violence. These victims are our mothers, fathers, daughters, sisters, sons, and brothers. The Commission will not allow survivors of sexual violence to be re-victimized through the TRRC process simply because they have been courageous enough to break their cultural silence in the Gambia and speak out against these such horrific violations. We should applaud and support them. If such harassment and intimidation of victims of sexual violence persists, the Commission may resort to frequent use of in-camera hearings, closed sessions hearings, as provided or stipulated in Section 16(4)(b) of the TRRC Act 2017 as a witness protection measure to safeguard the security and well-being, to safeguard their security and well-being. Where necessary, the Commission will not hesitate to take appropriate measures against anyone who threatens or interferes with a witness in violation of Section 36 of the Trrc Act 2017, as that constitutes a criminal offense. Therefore, the Commission urges members of the public to be empathetic, and supportive of victims of sexual violence and desist from harassing and intimidating these courageous individuals. That's the end of the statement. We will resume our proceedings tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.